Hello everyone, welcome to MJ Reads. I'm Em, and today we're going to be doing my wrap-up for April 2025. I, for real, almost said May, but we're not there yet. I read 18 books in April. Here are my stats, if you're interested. And I have quite a few that I no longer have copies of because I either had to give them back to the library or I just read them on audio or whatever. That normally doesn't bode well for me in doing a wrap up because I tend to forget stuff, so fingers crossed that I don't forget anything. But I have my reading journal, so hope for the best and expect the worst, as Mel Brooks would say. Is Mel Brooks problematic? Can I quote Mel Brooks? Is that appropriate? Anyways, let's start off with book club reads that I read this month since I have them right in front of me. I am part of a science fiction and fantasy book club, and I had gotten a little bit behind, so I had to read 2 in this month. I started off with Semiosis by Sue Burke. This is science fiction, and it takes place on another planet. Earth has had to evacuate because of climate change. And we're following a group of people generation by generation as they land on this new planet and start to colonize it. And there are things with how this new society of humans structures itself, how they interact with the new planet that they're on, how they interact with the flora and fauna on this new planet. And I started off really liking this. It was reminding me a lot of The Vanished Birds in how each section kind of felt episodic but then would build on itself and they were all ultimately interconnected. But I didn't like the second half very much. I didn't like the direction it went in. I had different expectations and of just like what the relationship and the dynamic was going to be between the plants and the humans, and I was kind of disappointed that it didn't go the direction I wanted it to go. It went the direction Sue Burke wanted it to go. I think this is fine. I think I gave it like a 3, maybe a 3.5, because I think the execution is good, the writing is good, and I liked the themes. I just didn't like the ultimate result. And this is part of a series, but I don't think I'm going to be continuing on with the series because towards the end I was bored, even though there was a lot of action happening. I just got bored. I wasn't invested, and I was just reading to get it done with as quickly as possible, which is never the vibe that I want. And then on the opposite side, so the pick for April was Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. This is a book that I have actually DNF'd in the past. When it first came out, I read about 50 pages of it. And there's like a potential forced birth, forced pregnancy component. And that is possibly my only trigger for books. And so I DNF'd because I just was too nervous about how prevalent that was going to be in this book. And then when the book club picked it, I was like, okay, well, I'll give it one more try because I still had my copy. I hadn't unhauled it yet. And I know a few booktubers whose taste I align with had given this a pretty high rating, and I wanted to try it again. And I'm so glad I did. Now, this wasn't like a new 5-star favorite. I gave this like 4 stars, but we're following Kerr, who is part of, again, this civilization of humanity that's on this space station and has really strict societal rules and hierarchy and structure. And Kerr and this group of girls who are the same age as she is, they've been raised as a cohort, they're about to get their assignments for adulthood, like where within the organization they're going to get placed, and I don't want to spoil anything. So Kerr gets her assignment and it prompts her down this path of rebellion, we'll say. I love Emily Tesh's writing. I've read her novella duology and I thought it was really, really good. I think I gave the first one 5 stars and the second one, if not 5 stars, also a fairly high rating. So I knew I liked her writing. That's still true. The issue I had with this book is that I don't know that there's a likable character in this book, and it's hard for me to read such a long sci-fi. I mean, it's not that long. Is it even 500 pages? It's not even 500 pages, and it does read fast. So it's not that long, but it is long for me when I don't have a character to care about. I did have one character I cared about, but they were such a minor part of the book. They were like in a couple scenes and then they were gone, but they were delightful for those couple of scenes that they were in. I did grow to like Kerr more, but Kerr is very insufferable for a vast majority of the book. And I don't really love an insufferable character, or like they either have to be insufferable but still likable in that insufferableness, or they need to be fun to hate. And Kerr was neither of those. So it's mainly a 4 because I like the writing. I liked the themes. There is a reveal about halfway through the book that's part of the reason it's like a 4 and not another 3.5, is because I liked the reveal. And it just added such an interesting like layer to the story. Those are my book club reads. And then I did read through the novellas that are the finalists for the Nebula Awards this year, and I'll link that video down below if you want to check it out. We're going to go through these rapid fire because I did talk about them all really in depth in that video, and I just don't have that kind of time today. So I read The Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain by Sofia Samatar. This is science fiction, and I thought this was fine. The writing is probably, out of the bunch, is the most technically good, for whatever that means. There's probably the most craft in this, if we're talking about writing as a skill, but I felt like this was the beginning of a story. Like where this ends is where the prologue should have ended, and then we should have had the rest of this book. This just felt like a setup for a larger novel, and I would have liked more. But this is also about class differences, hierarchy, and generational trauma. And then I read The Tusks of Extinction by Ray Naylor. I have read Ray Naylor in the past. I think ultimately that for me as a reader, Naylor's ideas are so cool, but his execution isn't quite there for me. This is another science fiction where humans have Jurassic Parked woolly mammoths back into existence, and we're following 3 POVs in this very short book, which I'd argue is too many POVs for a novella if you want me to feel emotionally connected to all of your characters and to care. One of them is a scientist who has died, and her memories and knowledge have been put into this matriarch of a woolly mammoth herd. And then we're following the son of a poacher who's poaching woolly mammoths for their ivory. And then we're following a man who's at this woolly mammoth reserve with his husband to ethically trophy hunt these woolly mammoths. And it's a lot. It reads a little bit more like a thriller, I think, or it wants to be more of a thriller than just pure science fiction. I thought it was fine. And I read The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Mohammed, and this is the only fantasy in the bunch, and this is like a fairy tale, like a dark fairy tale type story where these children go missing in this wood where once you go in, you never come out, and this woman is sent in to retrieve them. And I did really like this one. I think I gave this a 4. Also read Lost Ark Dreaming by Sui Davies Okungbowa, and this is again, science fiction, futuristic. It's set off the coast of Africa where this group of humans now live in these towers that were initially built for the wealthy to escape climate change, and now this is just where humans live. And the higher up on the caste system, the class hierarchy that you are, then the higher up you live in the tower. If you're middle class, you live in the middle, and if you're lower class, you live at the bottom, and some of the bottom levels are in fact underwater, which means these people live in the dark. And this is another one where we're following 3 POVs, which I think are too many. And I think one of them was totally unnecessary, but I did like the writing with this. It makes me want to pick up his fantasy trilogy that he has. Unfortunately, this did end up like elements of this reminded me of so many other things that I have read, which is a bummer, but I did like the writing, so I will check out more stuff by him. And then I read Countess by Suzanne Palumbo, and this is a queer Trinidad Count of Monte Cristo retelling, and this, I had the same issue with this that I had with the Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain, where I think this is the beginning of a novel, not a novella. I think the story that the author is telling would be served so much better if it was expanded, even to just like 300, maybe 350 pages. I felt like it was too quick, and I wanted more detail, more depth. I wanted more time to get to know our character before. I mean, it's a pretty faithful Count of Monte Cristo retelling, so I don't feel like this is a spoiler, but I wanted more time to get to know our main character before she was thrown in jail and before her revenge plot started. And then my favorite of the bunch is The Dragonfly Gambit by A.D. Sue. This was so fun. This is science fiction, space opera. Our main character, she is a former pilot. She is disabled, and she has a big old chip on her shoulder, and I loved her so much. She is basically forced to help this faction of humanity to win this war they are waging against another planet that they are trying to colonize, and she doesn't want to do it, but she's forced into it. There is like a sapphic relationship in here. I'm not going to call it a romance, but there is a sapphic relationship in here that gave me such strong Gideon and Harrow vibes. Like, if you just take the archetype of Gideon and the archetype of Harrow, that's what we're dealing with, and it is not healthy and it is not good, and they should not be involved with each other, but it was everything. I loved it so much. I gave this 5 stars. I had such a fun time, and I think if you read one novella out of this stack, obviously this is the one you should read. All right, let's go through the ones I no longer have copies of so that I don't forget them. First up is Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. I had an arc of this from my job at the bookstore, and then it was also an ALC from Libro FM, so I did end up listening to it on audio, which was a really fun experience, and I definitely recommend the audiobook. And this is about a woman who has her first orgasm while she's on a plane as a young teen, and as the plane is starting to crash, and it triggers this obsession with planes that goes into adulthood. And it's also very much about loneliness, and I just could not figure out how I felt about it for so long, but I ended up really liking it and giving it 4 stars. I was riveted the entire time, even when I couldn't really tell if I liked it or not. I kept turning the pages and I kept listening to the audiobook because I just had to know how this book was going to go. Like I couldn't predict what the next plot point was going to be, and it definitely drags a little bit in the middle. And our main character, I cannot remember her name, Linda, I think, made some choices that were very, like, made me as a reader feel very uncomfortable. I did not enjoy that part, but I just think this was so fun and chaotic and interesting and very creative. Oh, my other 5-star of the month was Ocean's Godori. This is by Elaine Yu Cho, and this is a science fiction space opera. This is kind of like if you liked Firefly, if you like a ragtag group of people who are on a ship together and doing what they need to do just to survive and trying their best. And this has a really great friendship in it, and I really loved it. I picked it up because Angela at Literature Science Alliance kept talking about it and really liked it, and it definitely did not disappoint, and I'm very excited for the sequel to come out later this year. I think this is, if you like Alex White or Megan E. O'Keefe or just Firefly, like I said, I think you would also really like Ocean's Godori. I read Vanishing Treasures by Catherine Rundell. This was for Buzzword Reading Challenge. I can't remember if I used this for the cover though or for the title part of the challenge, but this is basically broken up by creatures, and you're going through these creatures that are endangered, and it's really interesting and really fun. I learned a lot about a bunch of different animals that I really loved, and this is a great book to pick up and put down because since it's broken up by animals and each chapter is pretty short, you can just like flip. You don't have to read in order. You can just flip through the animals you're interested in the most. but this like was perfect for my Enneagram 5 brain because it was just a bunch of facts and facts that were communicated in a funny and interesting way. Continuing the animals theme, this was also for Buzzword reading challenge. I must have used this one for the title because the prompt was to read a book with an animal in the title, and then Vanishing Treasures must have been for the cover challenge, which was to read a book with an animal on the cover. So I think that's what I did. But On Animals by Susan Orlean is a collection of essays about Susan Orlean's obsession with various animals and her experiences with raising animals. There's a lot about chickens in this book. I read the library book by Susan Orlean years ago, which was about the history of libraries in the United States and was really great. And I also really, really enjoyed this. Her sense of humor is so great. And I just love a book by a person who's not a celebrity, is not anybody that you could like recognize going down the street. It's just like a regular person, but they have this niche interest, and that's my favorite type of nonfiction. I just love to hear about regular people's niche interests. And I got an audiobook through Libby that I've had on hold for months, and it finally came through in April, and it was For the Mourner's Bestiary by Erin Koffel. And this is her memoir. Erin has PKD, which is, I forget what it stands for, but it's a genetic kidney disease. And so this is her memoir about what it's like to grow up with this disease that her father also had, and what it's like to raise a child having a disease like this and being chronically ill. Erin ties her experiences with this disease to marine animals that live off the Gulf of Maine, which is an area of the country that she has spent a lot of time in and has a lot of emotional connection in. And she ties how those animals are reacting and adapting to climate change with her experiences with PKD, and I absolutely loved it. It was so good. Check trigger warnings because it's got some heavy shit in it, but it was such a great memoir. Okay, that's it for the ones I do not have copies of. So next we're going to talk about the 2 books I read out of my TBR jar. Yes, I read both of them. I did not DNF any, though I kind of feel like maybe wouldn't have been wrong to DNF one of them. I read The Magician of Tiger Castle. This is by Louis Sachar, and this comes out August 5th, later this year. And this is Louis Sachar's first adult fantasy novel. He is probably most famous for having written Holes and the Sideways Stories from Wayside School series. And I thought this was a really fun, light, frothy fantasy. I don't know that this is gonna stick with me, but I think if you just want, not cozy, I wouldn't say it's cozy fantasy, but just like lighthearted fantasy where nothing super traumatic happens. I mean, there is traumatic stuff because it's fantasy, but you know, it's not grimdark. It's not gonna ruin your day, basically. We're following Anatoly, who is the magician at this fictional castle in this fictional kingdom that maybe was in the south of France, maybe not, back in medieval times. He lives in this kingdom that is going through financial hardship, and the princess needs to make like an advantageous marriage to pull them out of it, but you know, the prince that she's supposed to marry is not a good guy, and so it's Anatoly's quest to kind of save his kingdom, but also save the princess. If you like reading about the most mediocre middle-aged white man doing his best, it's good for that too. And then the book I wish I had DNF'd is The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. I am so bummed that I didn't like this. I also read this for Jan Agaton's Coffin Cover Challenge. The prompt this month was to read a book with clouds on the cover. We got some wispy clouds above the house. This is about Marigold, who finds out that she is a witch and goes to this island that her family is the protector of. And it's supposed to be cozy, but like 3 characters die. I didn't buy the romance. I didn't really like the writing. And I don't know. This just wasn't a good time for me. I didn't like it. I think there are other books that do this much better. And this just wasn't for me. For my Year of Butler and Gaskell challenge, I read Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell this month, and this is my first Gaskell this year that is not a reread, and I gave this 2 stars. I don't know what this book wanted to be. The first half of it was like a character study for this town in England where Mary Barton's supposed to be our main character, but we're floating around to all these other characters and getting to know them and what like life in Manchester is like. And then the second half of this is a murder mystery where Mary Barton is trying to clear the person who's been accused of this murder and find out who actually did it. So it's very bizarre how it could be cut into 2 different books. I never really felt like Mary was our main character, even though her name was on the cover. And this felt like a lesser copycat of North and South, even though this one came first. Like she wrote this first, this was her first published work. But there's so many elements in here that are also in North and South, like almost copies of certain scenes that are in North and South. And I think North and South is the best version of those scenes, and it was pretty disappointing. I need to be really careful about what Gaskell book I pick next because I do not want to read another book by her that feels like a copycat of North and South. And I know a lot of her books have very similar themes because she wrote a lot on class and the haves and the have-nots of factory life in this time. So I definitely need to be careful on what I pick up next. If you've read Gaskell and you have a recommendation for which of her books I should pick up, let me know because I need to be strategic about this. Ooh, which book do I want to end on? We're going to talk about How to Steal a Galaxy by Beth Revis. This is book 2 in a sci-fi space opera novella series. The first one is Full Speed to a Crash Landing, and our main character is Ada Lamar, and she's a heist person. And we're continuing on from our plot from book 1. There is a romance, or like the beginnings of a romance between her and Ryan White, who's like this government agent type person. This should be a series that I love. There are so many buzzwords for this series that should make it a 5-star, but for whatever reason my brain bounces off of this writing so hard. Like the sentences are so slippery and I'll read them and it just like slips through my brain. And so then I have to go back and reread it because nothing stuck. And I wish I knew what it was about the writing that I didn't like or doesn't stick. I'm always so excited. Like I was so excited to read the first one. I thought I was going to love it. And then I just didn't. And then I picked up book 2 and I thought, well, maybe I'll like it more because now I'll know who everyone is and it will stick. Same problem. I'm so bummed. I don't know what to do about it. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to finish the series because I think there's a 3rd book that's either just come out or is about to come out. And they're so short, but they also take me so long to read for how short they are. I don't remember what I gave this. I think it's probably like a 2.75, maybe a 3. Okay. I read Walkie Practice by Dolki Min. This is a horror novella. It's a book in translation. It's been translated from Korean. And it's about an alien who is stranded on Earth and wears a human skin suit in order to go out in public and not freak everyone out, and also needs to eat people to survive, but also likes having sex with people before they eat them. And I read this because I heard that this had a lot of really interesting things to say about gender, and because the alien has very fluid feelings about gender, and I'm into that. I did not know about how much sex there was going to be in this book, and I was not prepared for that, and I didn't really enjoy it because it was just weird. It was just weird and it was gross in parts, and but it was also compulsively readable. I loved the writing. I think this translation is so good. So it was tough because I loved the writing and I thought it was so great. And I was very invested in what was going to happen, but also did not enjoy the content. I don't know if I've even gone back to rate this. When I finished it, I didn't know what to rate it, and I still don't know what to rate it. So I think I'm just going to leave it unrated. I don't know who I would recommend this to. I think if you like weird horror that swings more on the lit fic side, maybe you would like this. I think there's also, while I do agree that there's a lot about gender in here, there also, I think, is a lot of stuff about chronic pain in here, which I would be interested in seeing a review from somebody who lives with chronic pain, because a lot of the stuff the alien talks about with how their body feels on Earth with the weight of gravity and having to force themselves into a human shape in order to exist, it just felt like an echo of things my friends who live with chronic pain have said. So I don't know if that is intentional or just a byproduct of how the author has set this book up, but I did find that wrinkle very interesting. So yeah, I, again, don't know who I'd recommend this to, but it was a very interesting book. I'm gonna keep it because, like, I highlighted it a bunch. There were a lot of lines that I thought were really well written, a lot of themes I liked. I think the structure was really interesting because it's told through straight to reader narration, and then there's also text messages between the alien and humans that they are trying to date, and then there's also illustrations of the alien's body throughout, like as it warps. There's also really fun ways that the translator played with text in this book. Anyways, so might be a good book for a book club. I don't know. I feel like you could talk about a lot with this book. I think it's a good discussion book. All right, so that is all, I hope, 18 books that I read in April. I feel like it was kind of a mid-month. I read some stuff I really enjoyed, but then I also read a lot of stuff that I thought was just fine, that I wasn't super impressed with, which is probably not the vibe I want when I'm reading a lot of books that are either nominated for awards or were nominated for awards last year. So that's not my favorite, but I don't know. I don't know how to end that sentence. These are just the things I read. I wish I had liked more of them more, I guess, is the end of that. But anyways, if you have made it to the end of this video, I would love to know what you read in April, what your favorites were. If you've read any of these and have thoughts about them that you would like to share with me, I would love to hear it. If you just want to leave an emoji to let me know that you made it to the end of this video, let's do the backpack emoji for walking practice, and like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one.